Our message this morning is from John chapter 4, and I'm going to read verses 5 through 15 at some point. In the New Testament section of your pew Bibles, it's on page 94. So you can locate that and be ready. When it's time, it'll be John 4, 5 through 15. In the summer of 2007, I got into one of those big church vans that seat like 15 people. And myself and a couple other church leaders and a group of teens went to Gettysburg. All right? And we got to Gettysburg and we did the driving tour. Have you ever done the driving tour in Gettysburg? Anybody? Okay, yeah, some of us have. So what happens in the driving tour, at least back in 2007, is you got your media, your DVD or whatever it was, right? And you get in and you put it in and they're like, okay, drive to here. And you pause it and you drive there and then you press play and it tells you where you are and what happened there on that day. So you're going to all these specific parts of the battlefield and they're telling you over the course of the days of the Battle of Gettysburg what happened there. And then okay, now drive to here. And you drive there and you play it again. So if you can imagine like two cars and a bus or a van filled with teenagers and stuff, and what we do is we'd get to the spot and we'd all pile out, and then we'd all go stand around this guy's Subaru, Subaru Outback. We'd all stand around the Subaru Outback, and he'd play what happened there, and we'd all listen, and then we'd all go explore. The most interesting part to me was we saw all these different areas, and it was kind of like, well, what on earth? Like, I remember specifically the wheat field. If you know anything about Gettysburg, there's a battle that took place over a couple of days that's just in this wheat field, okay? And just wave after wave of people came in and died fighting in this wheat field. It made no sense to me. What's the deal with this wheat field? But the thing that sticks out to me still to this day and really got my biggest attention was when we got to Little Round Top. Little Round Top is this little like hill, but it's kind of like a ridge, and then there's Big Round Top right next to it. But Little Round Top is where the fighting took place in this particular battle. And Little Round Top is very much like all the hills in Pennsylvania in that they're just covered in gnarly trees and big like jagged rocks and everything, and they're steep up one side. And so what happened is the Union Army was trying to hold Little Round Top. And the Confederate Army was trying desperately to take Little Round Top. And I'm just standing there listening, and I'm like, why? What's the point of Little Round Top? And finally, when it was over, Little Round Top, it took place, it was really day 2 of the fighting. It was a nasty battle for Little Round Top to the point where I believe it was the Union Army that was low on ammunition, so they just put bayonets on and charged down the mountain in waves to push back the Confederate Army to hold this little hill. And I remember we climbed the hill, and on top of the hill, I believe it was Union troops from Maine who were in charge of holding Little Round Top. And there's it's almost like a little castle with a little tower up on top that's a monument built to the troops who held Little Round Top. And it made no sense to me why anyone would fight so hard for this little hill until we continued the driving tour. Because we got to the next stop, and we were out, we listened to whatever was there, and we're out standing around chit-chat, and one of the teen goes, oh, look, there's Little Round Top. We turned, and sure enough, there was Little Round Top. We could see the monument on top of the hill. And we went to the next stop, and we were there, and we were talking, and that teen goes, yep, there's Little Round Top. We turned, and yeah, sure enough, there's Little Round Top over there. And then it became a game. First person to find Little Round Top. And everywhere we went on the battlefield, we would stop, and we could find Little Round Top. So I pulled a map of the Battle of Gettysburg, and here's what I found out. The Union troops, it took them a while. It took them until pretty much day 2 to figure out a battle line that they were going to try to hold around Gettysburg. And it looks kind of like, I'll draw it for you, it kind of looked like a hook around the town of Gettysburg, all right? So looped up around north and then came all the way down to a point down here. And all the way down here is Little Round Top. Little Round Top, this jagged, scraggly little hill that forms part of a ridge. And what I realized is that Little Round Top was so important because whoever controlled Little Round Top controlled the southern flank of the Union Army. So to outflank the Union Army, they didn't have, they couldn't just go through Little Round Top or around that. They had to go all the way out wide, and they weren't going to do that. So that was the southern flank of the Union battle line. And not only that, it was an observation point where you could see the entire battlefield in Gettysburg. All right? Little Round Top. So what I learned from that is something that I've taken with me through the years. And the first is that just because I don't see it, right, something seems so ordinary to me, doesn't mean it's an ordinary thing. Little Round Top seemed so ordinary to me when I was standing there and trying to figure out why you'd lose your life over this little hill. But to the generals of the Union Army and to the generals of the Confederate Army, they recognized the extraordinary value of that little hill. It was a good lesson to me because I tend to see things, and I think a lot of us do, with ordinary eyes, right? We look at things with ordinary eyes. Little Round Top was the difference between what they would say is seeing things tactically and seeing things strategically. Somebody who's tactical would be like me if I was a private in the Union Army and they said, what is it you're doing here today? And I'd say, I'm going to fight and die to hold on to this hill. But to a general, if they were to say, well, what's going on today? They'd say, we are setting the entire southern side of our, right? The general sees the battle for days to come, where the private, like me, just sees what I have to get done today, what's going to happen today. And that's typically what I go through on a daily basis. I look around and I see, traffic, and I'm like, oh, it's another day of traffic. And then I go to work. It's like, okay, put my time in at work. And then I go to the grocery store and I stand in a long line. And then, it's on. I make dinner. I feed the dogs. These are all ordinary things that I do day by day. But if I can just take a moment and I can get outside of seeing things with my ordinary eyes, then maybe I'll begin to see things that I've missed before that were extraordinary, right? The faces of the people around me and my opportunity to go to the grocery store and cook a meal for the love of my family, to take the dogs out for a walk, to show them the same, a fraction of the appreciation that they show me, right? Because dogs tend to show you a lot more love than you show them. Unless you're not a dog person. But listen, the opportunity to serve and to share and to worship day after day, there's all the extraordinary moments that we have that I tend to miss with my ordinary eyes. And I think on some level, most of us have been conditioned to believe that somehow when you wake up in the morning, it's just another ordinary day with more ordinary events, talking to ordinary people along the way, which is why when you get asked, hey, what's going on? People will say something like, same old, or another day, another dollar, or if you're a little grumpy, same expletive, different day, right? That's what we do. It's the same. We get caught in a narrow view of things, and we miss the miraculous going on around us. Recently, there was I went on YouTube and I found a very specific chapel service that took place at Asbury University about a month ago, and I was like, I don't know what's so special about this chapel service, but I have to watch it. and I watched it on YouTube, and in this chapel service at Asbury University, to my eyes, there was nothing all that special about it. The music was fine, it was kind of typical for a college chapel service. And then the speaker got up and he was speaking part whatever on a series of Romans they were doing. And he gave a message. And I was like, that's, pretty good message, whatever. I wasn't sure what was special about it at all. But the interesting thing is that my ordinary eyes, that's what I saw watching on YouTube. What happened at that chapel service at Asbury University that day is that it didn't end. At some point in the service, there was someone, I think it was during the actual message that I watched, it was the person giving the service, he confessed to some abuse that he had suffered when he was a younger person. And he had gone through that, and he started confessing, what that meant in his life. And that confession opened up the floor to other people confessing. And that chapel service that was supposed to end just kept going for the rest of the day. And for the rest of the next day. And for the rest of the next day. And to the point where 2 weeks later, there were people coming, this was just within the last month, from hundreds of miles away, and were forming these long lines to get into this old chapel at Asbury. I mean, this is an old chapel. This is a chapel where there are signs on the wall. Please don't jump up and down in the balcony because we don't want it to fall down, right? There's nothing special about the chapel, about the service. But something special did happen to there. People called it a revival, to the point where it started to spread to other college campuses and around the country and around the world. This waking up of people's life, this opportunity to interact with God in some sort of special way was happening there. And so my ordinary eyes went onto YouTube to try to see it, and I couldn't see it. But God was doing something extraordinary amongst the people who were there. See, when I look with my ordinary eyes, I'm apt to miss the extraordinary. And I wondered, is the problem that I'm thinking tactically? Because I'm supposed to be living as a Christian strategically, some sort of way. Am I taking the short view, or am I taking the long view of things, right? I just keep telling these stories. This is great. It's fun. I was watching the news the other day, and the CEO of Spotify was on. Do you know what Spotify is? Yeah, it's a streaming music service for those of you who don't know. And Spotify has millions and millions of people who pay $10 a month to listen to music on their streaming platform. And the news person was sitting with him, and they go, "You have millions and millions and millions of people who pay for your service, and yet you've never been profitable as a company." And you want to know what the CEO of Spotify said? He goes, "Well, I'm not worried about that. If I wanted to be profitable, I could be profitable tomorrow." But that's not the point of what we're doing right now. We're still investing in the long-term success of our company. If we stop doing that, tomorrow we would have a profitable quarter. Right? We just take all the money people were giving us and we won't spend it anywhere else. Right? And I started wondering, is it possible for me to think to think bigger, like the CEO of Spotify, to see the value in something that I normally see as ordinary, like the generals at Gettysburg, to go into a worship service and feel something bigger than I can see with my own eyes. And that's what Jesus is going to do today. That's a long introduction, isn't it? Yeah. That's what Jesus is going to do today. He is going to meet with a woman at a well and ask for water. And when she gets talking about water, he's going to try to open her eyes to something bigger. In fact, we're not even going to read this far, but the disciples, when they come up on the scene, they're going to be worried about lunch. And they're going to tell Jesus, you need to eat something, right? And Jesus is going to try to get them to see something bigger than lunch. Jesus is going to tell this woman who's seeking water about living water, and he's going to tell his disciples later on who are looking for lunch that he has food that they know nothing about. It's kind of interesting. Of course, he does this by creating a scandal, as Jesus does, okay? Because what he's going to do is he's going to track down a Samaritan woman, all right? So only Jesus can do. Let's find a woman as a man and talk to her by himself sitting by a well. And let's make sure that she is someone whose religion doesn't jive with the religion of the people he's traveling with. It would be like me going, okay, we're going to open worship this morning, and who I'd like to have come up here and talk to us is a Syrian Muslim who just crept over their southern border into Texas. And we're going to listen to him. And immediately somebody in here is going to get a little bit of fear that somehow our worship service is going to be contaminated by someone who we don't want to give too much of our information to, right? And that's what Jesus is doing. He's taking someone who there'd be a little bit of fear, someone who we don't want to give too much information to because it might contaminate what we're trying to do. So here it is anyway. This is John chapter 4, verses 5 through 15. It says this. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Joseph's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well, and it was about noon. And a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. And the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans." And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." And the woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" And Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but those who drink of the water that I give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in there a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I may never be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." This is God's word for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So here's what's happening. Jesus sits with this woman who would have been considered less than him in the time, who is a Samaritan, a faith that would have been considered much less than the Jewish faith, which he claims as his own. And he would go on to have this long discussion with this woman about this woman's kind of, she's not satisfied with one man. She's had several husbands, and Jesus is going to talk her through that a little bit to let her know he knows who she is. He's going to offer her a gift of life. She is going to go down into the village. She's going to bring all of her villagers with her. There's going to be a revival in the town of Sychar in Samaria. Something that the disciples can't see, something that this woman, when he meets her, can't envision. And what Jesus is going to do is he's going to take this woman and he's going to raise her up, right? So that she knows that she's talking to him and they're on equal footing. Then the Samaritan, he's gonna again raise her up and let her know, you want to know what? We're on equal footing, but that in him there is something more than ordinary that is going to happen here today. There's something more than normal going on. And what he's going to talk about is living water. right? Which is kind of a strange thing, but it's this idea that like we're talking about water, but I want you to recognize is that there can be a wellspring flowing up inside of you of faith that can create some great opportunities that you don't even understand. Water's an interesting thing in our worship service, right? We talk about, I brought the baptismal up this morning. One of the crazy things about baptisms is that there are pastors who will like go to Israel and they'll come back and they'll fill a bottle full of water from the Jordan River, right? Jordan River, because the Jordan River is where Jesus was baptized, and they'll bring it up, and every time they do a baptism, they'll pour just a little water from the Jordan River in there, okay? As if somehow the water is special because of where it came from. And the cool thing, the actual cool thing about baptism, this is Members Mark purified water, right? The cool thing about what baptism actually is that there's nothing special about the water. It's just that God takes ordinary things and makes them extraordinary. And that's what Jesus is trying to get across to the woman at the well. He's like, look, we're talking water, but I'm talking you. And ordinary things are not ordinary in the sight of God. They're extraordinary. So he tells her, I need some water. What I want to give you is living water. When the disciples come, he says, keep your sandwich, right? There's a harvest coming in front of us. What Jesus does is he takes something that everyone views as less than, and he overcomes the fear of empowering that person or somehow being contaminated by that person, and instead he creates a brand new religion, a brand new relationship. The old way of thinking is now out. People who were not fully accepted are now elevated and challenged to go past their old realities. That's what's happening in this story. And so the moral of this story, as I see it and as I read it, is simply this, is that you are not ordinary. Nothing about what we're doing is ordinary. Nothing about who we are is ordinary. Because God is opening us up to possibilities of a life that are not defined by the same old, but by the gifts of God. In Ephesians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul says this little prayer halfway through his letter, and he says, and to the one who is able to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we can hope or imagine. Right? That's the God who is at work within us and in this place, is a God who can do more than we can even imagine. And we view it with ordinary eyes, but something extraordinary is bubbling up and waiting to happen. These things we do, like worship and study and prayer, they can certainly be boxes we check off. That's been the problem with religion since the beginning. Well, just give me the list to check off, and if I do all these things, I'm good, right? I won't be zapped by lightning or locked out of the church, right? Just give me the list to check off. But the fact of the matter is these things we do like worship and study and prayer also have the ability to open up for us a world of possibility beyond what we can imagine. Nothing that we're doing here is ordinary. This is not ordinary. How do we help other people see that? If we exclude people, which lots of churches are apt to do and lots of organizations are apt to do, we'll never help people see that, right? Unless we put people on equal footing and recognize in them that they're not only equal, but they're extraordinary, we'll never help them see that what's happening here is big. We are extraordinary. And therefore, we are free to move past what may be the realities that the world tells us is going on, and into new realities here in this place and in our own homes. We're free to explore who God says we are and not who the world says we are. I want you to just think about this personally. I recently heard that if you ask someone what words they use when they think of being old, the words that they use, you can use them to figure out how long they'll live. Yeah, so if they say things like, well, it's lonely, and I can't get around much anymore, and I don't have, right? If that's your view of getting old, then you won't live as long as someone who says it's freedom. I now have some financial freedom. I'm now free from my job from the 9 to 5. I now get to meet with my friends and point out all the happy things. This is not some crazy name it and claim it philosophy. The fact of the matter is all that that's saying is if we focus on our victories instead of our struggles, then we get more out of life. And so I challenge you to think, we don't have to sit with the world's realities anymore. We can go with God's reality, something extraordinary. I challenge you to declare your relationship with God as something special, and your life in Christ as something extraordinary. And here, in this place, where we're living our faith, to recognize that at any given time there's a harvest ready for us to work to bring in. I remember I was telling Sue Mott not long ago, something that I was talking to Lisa as well. I said I have a tendency to think if they come, we will build it. Right? If more kids come in, we will build it. If more people come in, we will do something about this. Right? And the fact of the matter is, if you ever watch the movie Field of Dreams, it's the opposite. If you build it, they will come. But oftentimes we're so caught up in the reality, in the ordinary, that we can't see past it to the extraordinary. We have to think about not who we are, but who we can be. We have to think strategic about our future. Listen, if we know the one we worship here, we'd ask for more. Because the possibilities here and in our lives are endless. And in Christ, our lives are anything but ordinary. All right? They are extraordinary.